Listen up, get ready, I'm not gonna take no more. There's a revolution, a revelation going on in my soul. Buckle up, get ready, we're not gonna sit back.
Welcome back to Live from the Heartland, and it really brings me a lot of pleasure always to bring on our sometimes host, one of our producers, the one and only Thom Clark.
Happy New Year, Michael. It's good to be
here.
Hello
there. Happy New Year to you. I asked you to come on today, Thom, because you know I love this photograph that you made that hangs in my entryway. It's a picture of Jimmy Carter with Harold Washington, and I believe it was taken at Sunnyside and Greenview in the church over there. I lived on that block, but I didn't see that event. But you were there, and you got a great picture of Carter and Harold Washington and Rosalind Carter, and then there's a little young girl up in the window looking out. For those of you who are watching this on YouTube or on CAN TV, you'll see this picture. Otherwise, it has to be described. Let me just have Thom take over here and tell us about what was going on that day, Thom, and that picture, because it is a beautiful picture, and Jimmy Carter was a beautiful man. We certainly had our criticisms of him back in the day when he was the president, but looking back on it, he couldn't have been much better.
He actually accomplished a lot more than he was given credit for at the time because of the energy crisis, inflation, and the Iran hostage crisis. But that picture was taken as when he was ex-president, but already very involved with Habitat for Humanity. And that picture was actually taken on North Kenmore Avenue in the 4700 block, a two-flat owned by former Voice of the People executive director Ann Harper. And the young person in the upstairs window, which makes the photo, I think, was her tenant. And I don't have any other information on that family or where that young person is now. But she was, her expression is, she's clearly bored with all the festivities taking place in front of her house with all these dignitaries from all over the country, because it was kind of a kickoff for Habitat in Chicago. The Carters got a lot of attention for their work on the West Side, and rightfully so. Bethel New Life and Mary Nelson were very involved with that effort. But he actually came to Uptown first to work on this almost finished two-flat in terms of rehab work. So it was a very exciting day, and it was exciting for me because I'm a freelance photographer at the time and freelance writer, and I happened to hear about this event because I knew people in the neighborhood. It was right next to the Associated Colleges of the Midwest apartment, so there are lots of young students at the time, grown up now adults, and they remember this day and my subsequent photo very well. And I just felt very lucky. All the media was there, AP, Sun-Times, Tribune. We were all standing on the same media platform, but I got the picture. And I say that because I was recently on Ben Jarafsky's show, and he spent some time talking about my photography as an example of something he didn't think many people knew about me. And he pined that he hoped I made a mint off of that photo. Well, to be honest, a lot of nonprofits made money off of that photo. I never made a dime. And, you know, that's probably my own lack of getting my stuff out there and marketing. But you've been a lot better at that, Michael, in marketing your archival photography.
Well, I'm not rolling in the dough, but I do stand corrected about where the photo was shot. And somehow in my mind, I always had it over in the neighborhood where I lived, but I was long gone from that neighborhood. So it was on 4700 block of Kenmore, not Greenview and Sunnyside. And it was in 86, so I wasn't living there anyhow. You know, one of the other photographs that you took that I like, I think you gave me a copy of it once, was you got a photograph of Mick Jagger that's pretty good too.
Yeah, in 1970, I was at Loyola's Rome Center. We got connected with a local nightclub owner who loved catering to American students in Rome for the year. And we made a deal where I got really choice tickets to a basketball stadium concert by the Rolling Stones. And believe it or not, my draft card is what got me, in lieu of a press card, up to the front of the stage and 20 feet away from the Stones. So
You
that's
hadn't
where
burned your draft card by then?
I had turned it in, but they sent me a new one before I went to Rome. They moved me from a 4D ministerial exemption to a 2S deferment. I didn't ask for that. I had filed for a conscientious objector at that point, but my draft board didn't want to let go of me that way, so they reassigned me. Loyola had something to do with that, because there was a lot of cooperation with the government, and we have this new student who just showed up, and so I got a new designation, and I got a new card, and I had a press card. It was below, it was lost in my wallet. And while I'm fumbling through the Italian security people, by the way, they were overwhelmed. They had no idea what they were dealing with in this basketball stadium, but I did get a great shot.
Well, you got some great photos, and I'm going to get to look at more of them over the years, and you'll look at more of mine. You mentioned when we were talking about Jimmy Carter, Habitat for Humanity. Why don't you tell our listeners and our viewers just what Habitat for Humanity is, and then take and roll with a little bit about our president, Jimmy Carter.
Some people will label Carter as our best ex-president, but look at the record. He dealt with some very tough issues, and probably history will treat him better, in part because of his reputation since he left the office. He was beat by Ronald Reagan, just to bring us back to that time, because we're anticipating in less than a month another guy coming in that we fear as much as Reagan, if not more so. But I mention that because I think the hostage crisis in particular really dealt Carter a bad hand. He had to deal with the culmination of years of misaligned Middle East foreign policy on the part of the U.S. government, and he had to deal with the mess. But people forget he got the first peace agreement. He got Egypt and Israel to sit down and sign an agreement. Who would have thought, particularly in this current environment with Zionists going nuts in Israel? But Jimmy Carter was probably the most decent president we've ever had, and I would say politician in general. He lived the life of a public servant to the nth degree. Was he an aggressive politician, a shrewd strategist? Yes. You don't become president without having some of that, particularly a Southern Baptist being nominated and winning as the head of the Democratic Party. I mean, that's a pretty phenomenal thing. He actually had an opportunity to try to regain some of the South that was lost when Johnson signed the voting rights bill. We're still trying to recover from that. The South, to do a broad brushstroke here, is still fighting the war between the states. And right now they think they're winning because they got their guy in. But wait for their transfer payments to stop. Anyway, I'm off the Carter thing. I've long respected Jimmy Carter. One of my true treasures in my house is a copy of that photograph, autographed by Jimmy Carter. Unfortunately, Harold died before I had a chance to get him to countersign it. But
well, I'm glad I've got it hanging in my house. I do really appreciate it. We were talking about Carter and Egypt. He brought, Egypt and Israel together. They made a deal. The deal still lasts. Although I did see that Menachem Begin really nixed the deal for a broader settlement in the Middle East, and people don't really talk about that. How don't we move along to the Middle East and talk about a little bit about that and some other issues that we're going to have to deal with, whether we're in power or out, and we are out right now.
We're out in part because of discouraged voters that didn't show up on our side. And I think one chunk of those discouraged voters were the youth that turned out in mass, similar to how we did during Vietnam, to protest the style or the way the U.S. engaged and supported Israel in its counterattack on Gaza. There's no question that the raid by Hamas on October 7th, over a year ago now, was tragic and terrorism of sorts. But the Israeli response sense is way beyond the pale. And I think the Democrats lost this last election in part because of how many disenchanted voters just didn't bother showing up, and the turnout numbers show that. Turnout was down from 4 years ago, and I think that's both young voters, 100 to 200,000 voters in the Detroit area, where there's a very strong Arab population. It's been there for generations. And I just think those were too many strikes against an incredibly exciting, emerging, but she only had 100 days to run for office and had to run in the shadow of how Biden had conducted our foreign policy in Israel.
Thom, one of the issues that's been in our lives for all our lives almost is immigration. And we have welcomed over many, many years people from other countries to this country, and it's helped to make it what it is. We also see it as a sticking point always that the right brings up and challenges about without much advice for how to go forward and how to deal with it. Last couple of weeks back, we had someone from the ACLU on talking about their preparing to deal with the immigration fight as it comes up in the months, weeks, years to come. What's your take on immigration right now and Chicago's ability to deal with it? You might throw that in too.
I think one of our bigger challenges locally in the coming year is to hold Brandon to our commitment to be an open sanctuary city. He's going to be under tremendous pressure as the federal government perhaps tries to withhold funds by being a sanctuary city. We need to make sure he holds strong, even while we may have to struggle through some other challenges depending on what the next administration does. I have some hope, though. This incoming administration does not have a good record for actually getting stuff done. They have a lot of hot noise about what they say they're going to do, but they never quite seem to get around to doing it. I have no doubt that there are going to be some people hurt with this incoming administration, but I don't think they're going to quite pull off the wholesale change to the American fabric, good and bad, that we've all been living with. Immigration is clearly one of those issues globally that seems to have given rise to a lot of right-wing influences, particularly in Western Europe and in other places as well. And it befuddles me. There would not be a United States of America without immigrants. None of us were here to begin with, except Native Americans we pushed out and Black Americans that we brought here on ships. Everyone else came here as immigrants. Everybody. So where do we get off saying that we don't want immigrants here? In fact, I think one of the biggest issues on the right will be the struggle between the technocrats like Musk, who want immigrant labor because they want that high-skilled labor, special visa program to allow that to happen. And the MAGNA folks don't want that special visa program to continue. So there's a big conflict within the right now over how to treat certain higher skilled immigrants. And I think that's an opening to their whole agenda about deporting people. I think it's going to end up being kind of a weak plank in their platform because they don't have the money to do it, number one. And number two, when farmers and even resort operators like this guy in Florida, he operates a place called Margo del Lago. He gets 40 to 60 seasonal employees from Central America every year on a special visa. So we have a strange attitude about immigrants, and it's a way the right wing has successfully framed other. We are scared of the other. And if we can label others coming here to improve their lives and their family's future other, then we can easily discard them. And I think that's the dynamic we're dealing with right now. Oh, they're getting something I don't have, so they can't have it anymore. Not realizing, if you look at the facts, that most of the red states that voted this administration in had the biggest dollar amount of transfer payments of any northern state, we're supporting the South right now financially through the federal government, through transfer payments, I mean, food stamps, welfare, as well as military installations that are totally subsidizing many of those local state governments. And I think until we wake up and realize that, then Johnson's prediction about the Democrats losing the South will continue for another generation.
We'll get it back. Maybe we'll get Andy Bashir in there or something from Kentucky. Thom, you were just recently on the Jurafsky show. And how about sharing a little bit about that? Because, he's on Lumpen Radio. He writes for The Reader. He actually, Lumpen Radio, which is a newer place to find our show, has not only Hitting Left with the Klonsky, but Ben Jurafsky and Live from the Heartland. So there's a lot of good listening and streaming over there. But talk about your visit with Ben.
Well, I had actually been kind of harassing Ben that why he had never had me on the show. He has a very lively podcast once or twice a week, in addition to his occasional reader column. And it's a very entertaining, I would even call Ben hilarious at times.
Can be.
The way that we went through the politics of the day, as well as a lot of history. I think he really wanted me on to kind of do a review of not the past year, but the past 4 decades or so that we have known each other through various pursuits that we had been around the edge of each other, but, never quite always in the same room. But in any event, we had a really good time talking about specifically how the downtown media have covered 5 different mayors. And our rough conclusion was that council wars happened because of the way the media never accepted Harold as a real mayor. He wasn't Daley. He wasn't going to get things done, despite everything he got done in a short 5 years in office. Ben Jurafsky opined that Gene Sawyer and Lori Lightfoot really took it on the chin because the downtown media is essentially racist. I didn't disagree with him. We both had issues with Sawyer and Lori Lightfoot, but we had even more issues with Daley getting more or less a free ride for all the corruption in his administration, and Rahm as well. Rahm, could do no wrong despite doing wrong all the time in terms of favoring developers over the rest of us. So it was an interesting discussion looking at that with a very well-informed political writer. And I simply say we had a blast, and listeners and viewers can listen in if they want to the hour traipse through Chicago politics and history. And you can find it streaming on the web.
Well, that's good. Would you like to talk a little bit about our neighborhood?
Rogers Park is one of the luckiest things that I ever fell into. Gene and I are marking not only a significant anniversary and significant birthdays this coming year, but we're 35 years now in our home in Rogers Park and couldn't be happier with our new addition and all that. I think that this is continuing to be a vibrant neighborhood like any neighborhood in a big city. We have our challenges. We have we have a real mutual aid, self-help way about going about things, whether it's our love pantry, where food is there pretty much every day of the week for people who are hungry and need it. They don't have to wait for the next food pantry to open up. They can go to the love pantry next to Honey Bear there in Greenleaf. And that's just one example. Getting life preservers on the lakefront so that we can maybe get the number of drownings to drop. This beautiful lakefront that we can just walk out onto. There's no other place except in South Shore that you can do that in the city. Walk from your neighborhood directly across Sheridan Road and onto the beach. It's just a wonderfully rich culturally, with people from all over the world and restaurants from all over the world. It's just a wonderful place to live, our own Rogers Park.
It really is. And, we have a pretty good set of politicians, too. Our Alderwoman, Maria Haddon, our state rep, Kelly Cassidy. Maria Haddon had promised to get a new shelter built after we had that encampment at Toohey Park. That's happened. I would like to say that Susie's Noon Hour Grill, Susie gave it up. You know, she was running it all by herself. She was close to 90. And there's a new person in there, Korean restaurant, and it's pretty neat. We'll have you back next month, Thom, and I'll see you certainly before then. And I want to thank you for always imparting your knowledge and your things you see and are aware of to all of our listeners and viewers.